Welcome to Science Sundays. My name is Sean Downey, and I'm an associate professor in the anthropology department in the College of Arts and Sciences, a core faculty member of the OSU Sustainability Institute, and the co-director of the Computational Social Science Community of Practice in the Translational Data Analytics Institute here at OSU. As a leader in research, Ohio State University seeks to expand the boundaries of human knowledge to understand the implications of our complex society, to enrich our individual imaginations and our collective culture. Science Sundays is one of the premier outreach events of the College of Arts and Sciences, and today we're delighted to host Professor Tanya Berger-Wolf. Professor Berger-Wolf is a professor of computer science and engineering, electrical and computer engineering, and evolution, ecology, and organismal biology at The Ohio State University. She's the director of the Translational Data Analytics Institute and the Imagiomics Institute, co-founder and director of the AI for Wildlife Conservation nonprofit, WildMe. Before we get started today, there's just a couple of details for those that are new to this event. Today's talk is the last lecture of our spring series, so if you'd like to be alerted of the future events for this fall, please sign up online. The talk today is being recorded and it'll be shared on YouTube, so we do ask you that you hold your questions until the end, and there's going to be plenty of time for a moderated discussion. And then finally, after the talk, we invite you to a reception in the Traditions Room on the second floor of the Union, where we can continue our conversations more informally. So with that, thank you very much for coming today on this afternoon, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Berger-Wolf.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you everybody for showing up. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Okay, so with that, and all the titles out of the way, let's talk about artificial intelligence for wildlife conservation and why bother. So many of you may have seen these reports, maybe even this specific one, that we're losing biodiversity at an unprecedented rate. We are in the middle of what has been also termed the sixth extinction. That sounds pretty drastic. You know, one of the recent reports says that that 1 million species are facing extinction. So let's see, is it a lot or a little, 1 million? To put it in context, how many species of animals, plants, and fungi are there total, overall? Just yell out numbers, I'll repeat them. You won't be able to hear each other on the video, but that's okay. It's 10 zillion, fantastic number. I heard 1 billion. 3 billion. What? We don't know. So, but it sounds like we're kind of on the order of magnitude of like billions and zillions. 9 million. 9 million, the estimated number of animals, plants, and fungi out there. 9 million, which means the 1 million is more than 10% of the organisms we have on Earth, of the biodiversity of species, right? This is shocking. The problem is that we don't even actually know what we're losing and how fast. These are estimates. These are kind of very broad estimates. The International Unit for Conservation of Nature Red List, which is the official international organization that tracks the biodiversity of the world. In fact, they're also nicknamed the barometer of life. It's their job to track the biodiversity of the world. So of the 160,000 species that they're tracking out of the 9 million, right? So this is the organization that when we say that the species are endangered, it's because that organization has a species committee for that species, and according to some metrics, they've determined that the appropriate designation status for those species is endangered. So of the 160,000 species that they're tracking about, 20,000, more than 20,000, their official conservation status is data deficient, meaning we have no idea How many, where they are, where they're going. Is the population stable, increasing, decreasing? Nothing. We don't even have enough data to make a reasonable guess. And you see that there are other options there. Another 60,000, more than 60,000, their official conservation status may be known, but their population trend is unknown, so we don't know which direction they're going. And these are not obscure species. Orcas, killer whales, their official conservation status is data deficient. The largest whale, right? Like, how could we not know what's going on with that species? Iconic conservation status, iconic conservation species, polar bear, their population trend is unknown. So if we don't know for those, what do we know? And how do we know? How do we get a clue about what's going on? So it's been said in many different reports that biodiversity and conservation has a data problem. So I'm a computer scientist, first and foremost, although I have affiliations in 3 different departments. And while I'm not the person to go out in the field and really work to put in place conservation policies and practice and interventions to save the biodiversity of the world, data is something I can do about, right? Can do something about. So the goal then is to really address this biodiversity and conservation data problem and to get as quickly as possible both the sort of as much data, additional data as we can, as broadly as a high resolution for as many species and as many geographic areas, and also provide tools that extract something out of. So we do have recently, I mean, there is an opportunity. It's actually feasible because recently there's been a huge development in technologies that provide additional data sources not available even a decade ago. So we have satellites that provide remote sensing data, autonomous vehicles on the water, on the ground, and in the air that can provide all kinds of sensing data, including images, acoustics, LiDAR, and everything else. We have on-body sensors, so you can put sensors like GPS accelerometers, even magnetometers, compass, and voice recorders. There's like, these animals now are equipped better than some of the like spies out there. So heart rate monitors like star athletes, right, these animals. And we can get a lot of data that way. We can put in situ sensors, so that's camera traps. So these are stationary sensors that monitor everything from soil moisture and wind directions to things like camera traps. These are motion-activated cameras that can take pictures when an animal passes by, or wind blows, who knows. And acoustic sensors and many, many, many others. And most importantly, we also have this amazing sensor, amazing technology that will bring in pictures, recording, and if you equip it with additional kind of attachment, a lot of other information. And we have many, many, many carriers of that technology throughout the world, right? So by far, the most abundant and readily available source of information today about anything are images, from what you had for lunch to what you see in your backyard or in a fancy safari tour. So quick show of hands, maybe. How many of you have taken a picture of a living organism, remember humans are living, in the last week? Oh, look at this, almost everybody. How about today? Still a good number. So there's a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of hands, even with the light shining in my face. So there are a lot of images that are out there to give you a sense of how many. Just one platform for citizen science observations of nature called iNaturalist. This is just one platform of many. Anybody knows about it? Heard about it? Raise your hand if you reported on iNaturalist ever. A few hands, okay. So this is a platform and an app, and you can do it on your phone. You see a plant, a fungus, an animal, including insects. You take a picture, whether it's your backyard or that fancy safari tour, and it immediately uploads, and it will, even identify what it is down to species, right? So that one app, one website, one platform has more than 130 million photographs of more than 400,000 species. That's a lot. But if you look at it a little bit closer, what are you noticing? How, right? So there is a density of observations that's really, really concentrated around Europe, US. Not too bad about South America, but Africa is sparse. And if you compare this with a map of biodiversity of the world, this is the biodiversity concentration, so of all the species. That is a little the wrong kind of bias, right? Because exactly where the highest concentration of biodiversity of the world is where we have few observations. In fact, if we want to make sense of the observations of all those data coming from all of these different sources, we will need technology of different kind. We will need AI to be able to extract information out of these images. And the state of AI production in the world compared to the biodiversity of the world is even worse in some way, because these circles represent the production per country of AI-related publications, patents, technology. Right? It is almost exactly complementary, right, to where the biodiversity of the world is and where it needs to be, where that technology is needed. So we really need two tasks here. Bring in more sources of data from many more different places than it is right now, and to up the technology, because this is not just mere, okay, well, so there's technology that's produced in the US and it can be deployed in Africa. Fantastic. The problem is that technology that's produced in the US is unaware of the questions and challenges and the context of deployment of that technology in Africa, for the most part. Right? So you cannot actually take the technology that's currently produced and directly apply it all the way to extracting the necessary information out of the images for biodiversity conservation, to extract that biodiversity data, useful data. Not only that, quite often the model that, okay, well, we have that technology in the US, so let's collect the data then in Africa somewhere, bring it to US, process it, and spit out the answer. That doesn't work. That is this sort of same old colonial approach that, except data now is the resource. So we'll take your data, we'll process it in some black box, and provide you with an answer that will require policy adjustment, resource investment. We will tell you what to do. That also doesn't work. So we really need to develop technology in the context of where it's going to be applied with those for whom it is intended, not for them. Right? And there is a lot of technology, a lot of AI methodology that already exists and can be adapted. And again, show of hands, this is an interactive talk. How many have heard the words like ChatGPT? All right, or DALL-E? Okay, fewer. So there's a good show of hands on that. So this is the topic of the conversation. So that's the other issue with AI technology, and particularly applying it in the context of biodiversity and conservation, is that it's insanely resource hungry. It is technology that requires a lot of rare metals to even get those GPUs and the processors needed for training the models. It requires an insane amount of electricity and water. Here's a chart from the recent AI index report that just came out. This is the CO2 emissions in tons comparable to like a flight from New York to San Francisco, lifetime of an American life, lifetime of a car that's, average, including fuel and everything. And this is training that GPT-3 model. Right? So when we use technology like AI, like machine learning in the context, we need to be very aware to not cause more damage and more harm in many different ways than the benefit that we would derive from that technology. So with that, we go, one of the approaches to really, kind of leverage both this map and this chart in the do no harm way is to reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So there is a lot of technology that's already developed. We can off the shelf, without retraining, without adding to that big CO2 and leveraging all the stuff that's been already produced and published. We have methods that can take a picture and find all the animals or other objects of interest that are in it. So we can find all the zebras and buffalo in the image automatically. We can put bounding box around each one. That's called localization. We can, even when they're kind of overlapping one another, we can classify all the species. So that's gravy zebra and African buffalo. We can put this kind of pose estimation, put a skeleton figure that will allow us to differentiate the different kinds of movements and activities. And we can even identify. So that last part, so that is the technology we developed, that we can take all these millions of images, and there are millions out there, actually billions probably by now, well, one single. So we can take all these images, and we developed a platform called Wildbook, which is a flagship project of the nonprofit WildMe. And it started with a research project, actually a classroom research project, that developed into a research publication that we found out was actually very, very, very in-demand technology and could be used to fill that gap of data. And so we started a nonprofit because the goal was not to publish a paper, the goal was to have a nonprofit, and started thinking of how we develop that technology, that AI, in a very responsible way, with the purpose of filling the data gap in conservation. So taking all these millions of images, automatically finding which ones contain animals, where the animals are in those pictures, so remember that's detection and localization, putting this bounding box around each one, and even that baby elephant hiding behind its mom, so recognizing that, which is not an easy task. And then identifying not only species, but down to individual animal, as in Zippy the zebra, and Joe the giraffe, and Terry the turtle, and Willie the whale.
That's an amazing amount of photos. I wonder how do they sort through them all and then identify individual animals? Each image is processed through a series of convolutional neural networks and matching algorithms. The first network determines whether there are any animals of interest. In this case, zebras. The next set of networks localize each animal in its subregion and classify the species. At this point, background segmentation is performed in the subregion to generate a rough mass of the zebra. Once this is done, key points are extracted from the zebra, and feature descriptors are built. These descriptors serve as a sort of fingerprint that can be compared for similarity against previously identified individual animals in a large database. The scores from this comparison allow the system to decide which animal most likely matches. When the match has high enough confidence, it's accepted immediately. Matches that have lower confidence are shown to a human expert, who then makes the final decision.
So that's the first partnership with a human, where we actually do not do fully automated recognition, but trade off the human knowledge for where it's absolutely needed. And we can do it for any striped, spotted, wrinkled, notched animal in the water, on the ground, including also using the shape of a whale's fluke or the dorsal fin of a dolphin. And there are now, the description you heard is the first algorithm that was in 2013. We have now 11 different algorithms that are constantly being added, because the whole project, the whole platform is an open source project, and so people can add and plug in the new algorithms and for a new species. So together then with information on when and where the image was taken, we can really start using images as the source of information about, well, animals in this case. We can, because the geotagging, right, the when and where, really can give us information about where the animal has been, so we can track, count, even do social networks. So this is a page of a wild book for whales and dolphins, cetaceans, called that wild book. They were each named by the founding organization that started, that put the first species information into that wild book. So that one was named Fluke Book. And this is the most cited animal individual in that wild book. Pinchy is a sperm whale. Sperm whale is a social. So from co-sightings, we can really figure out the social network, who she hangs out with. And she hangs out around Dominica. She's a very, very social, also in a sense that she likes her picture taken. Yeah, she's a ham. So the wild book for whales and dolphins, the Fluke Book, has more than 2 million, actually already more than 3 million images of coming from about 343,000 reported sightings of almost 70,000 uniquely identified individual whales and dolphins. In fact, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, put the entire North American catalog of whales on the platform. So with that, now we can really start getting these indicators for the endangered species, or for any species, of what's their population size, what their range, what the population trend. So any guesses which are one of the newest species added to this wild book? All right. Killer whales. Killer whales. So several months ago, we added killer whales to wild book, and immediately organizations and individuals started adding information that they already had, going back to historical information. We use the shape of that fin. So it turns out that thing, that shape, is unique to every individual. It allows to identify individual. And now there are thousands and thousands already observation records for killer whales. So the Species Commission, we hope that by the end of this year, the Species Commission for IUCN Red List for killer whales will be able to reassess the conservation status of orcas, of killer whales, and they will be data deficient no more. Right. That's incredible. And so, okay, are we done? No, right, we're only halfway through the talk, I would have. But this is also, we're not done because this is tiny, right? Yes, we've been able to bring in policy to fill in a tiny, tiny, tiny data gap, but it's not enough. We're also not tapping all the sources. We put the technology that people can use to upload existing data, including organizations, but we need more. So we build an intelligent agent, a bot, that can scrape publicly posted videos and actually images also on social media, and find the ones of the relevant species, find the frames that contain contain animals, and run them through the entire image analysis and find the individual representing this as image, add it to the appropriate page, but also, well, when we built this in 2018, it was like, wow, you can do this. You can actually generate text. Today, it's not shocking, right? anymore that AI can generate automatically, can generate text. That, hey, at 2 minutes, 46 seconds in this video, we found this individual whale shark. Here's everything we know about it, linked to the appropriate web page. And it can also interact and find if in the title it's not like here, it says whale shark diving, Cancun, July 2017. So we have information also where and when. But if not, the agent can ask question, hey, where did you see this whale shark? When did you see this whale shark? People start telling us stories. Oh, last year my family and I went to Cancun. We had an incredible time. Saw 7 whale sharks. Oh, wait, you're an AI. July 2017. Thank you very much. But people also respond because the most common response that we get is, wow, this is amazing. How can I help? Right? And that thing of little bit of programming, right? A little bit of technology that not only was able to use this data and add it to the information that conservation organizations can use, but also connect with somebody and make them realize that this little vacation video or photo that they had can actually be useful for science and conservation. And they probably have more. They probably can add a lot more data to this. Right? And now they're motivated. They also have a connection with the animal. Beyond just like, wow, seeing an amazing whale shark, which is amazing. But now they know this particular whale shark. And they want to know more about whale shark and this whale shark. And they're a little bit invested. So we get this connection now of a person who may not have been that invested before. Not only that, but at the bottom of each page of a wild book, in this case, Wild Book for Sharks, we put all the contributors who contributed data to that specific individual's data. Because these are global species. There is not one organization, there is not one research project that has information even about all of the information, even about one individual. It is only by putting that data together that we can truly put the global picture of a global species. And we build the technology intentionally to connect. Notice this is not about AI. This is about how you build and deploy that technology. The technology that connects people, connects data, connects geographic regions, connects different projects. Right? It connects people with the animals. So the Wild Book for Sharks, Shark Book AI, today has more than 17,000 uniquely identified sharks from many different species. Data of the almost 100,000 observations contributed by more than 9,000, almost 9,500 volunteers who directly upload their data to the website, just ordinary people, as well as 321 conservation and research projects, and one very intelligent bot who brings in more data, in fact, than all the human contributors combined. And we've done analysis that actually brings unique data. So that is amazing, right? That is suddenly opens up a huge, huge source of additional data that was untapped before. And so from this data, the IUCN entry for whale sharks was also updated. So prior to Wild Book project, and the initial Wild Book for whale sharks was called whaleshark.org. It's now renamed Shark Book AI. So prior to Wild Book for whale sharks, the global population size of whale sharks, the largest fish on Earth, was estimated to be 103,000 with a standard error between 27,000 and 180,000. It's appropriate response because that laughter, right? Because that's a very scientific way of saying we have no clue. So in 2016, the Species Commission for Whale Sharks for IUCN Red List reassessed, according to the metrics, based on data from Wild Book, the conservation status of this species, and changed the conservation status from vulnerable to endangered, and the population trend from stable to decreasing, not because the species are doing worse, but because we have the right data to correctly assess the status of the species. And that matters because that change means a change of policy, change in protection, change in resource allocation, change in the laws that govern every aspect of these species' life, including intersection and interaction with fishing boats, right? And different governments sign on different parts of this agreement and put different resources. And then that change then kicks in a lot of this agreement, activates a lot of these agreements. So that is impactful. Also, the most comprehensive study on the biodiversity of this species was published from the data from Wild Book and co-authored by 37 authors who met through these pages of Wild Book. At the bottom of each page, here's who contributed. That's how these co-authors met. And this is the paper that, as one of the papers I'm most proud of in my entire scientific career. I'm not a co-author on this one, on this paper. But the technologies that we built, the algorithms that we developed, the sort of, and how we deployed them enabled that. And enabled a huge impact, right? Not only in a scientific understanding of the biology of these species, understanding seasonality of migration patterns, but also in a follow-up paper saying that is how we need to using that data, right? And it is enabled by technology that connects people and brings all of the data together, right, from different sources and different places. We have platforms for more than 60 species, and actually probably by the time I said this, it's probably more than 70, because we're constantly adding new species, and the demand to add is incredible. So one of my favorite species, and this is, you can see that this is marine to terrestrial, spanning the entire globe. One of my favorite species is the weedy and leafy sea dragons. They're seahorses, or relatives of seahorses. They're funky species. They're Australian species, indicator ones for coral reef health as well. And yes, these aliens are uniquely identifiable as individuals. The same technology that was used to build Wild Book and sort of create this global platform and increase the throughput of biodiversity data was also used to enable the first ever full census of a species using photographs from ordinary people. For the first time in 2016, hundreds of people, for 2 days in January, they were driving around Kenya, taking pictures of every Grevy zebra that they saw. So Grevy zebras are not the ones you're thinking about. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, thousands of zebras riding in Serengeti with, wildebeest. These are not the zebras you're thinking about. These are not the zebras you're thinking about. The ones you're thinking about are the common zebra, also known as plain zebra. They're not endangered. These guys, the Grevy zebras, you mostly would see at the zoo. There's about 3,000 of them left in the world, and 95% of them are in Kenya. They're a small population in Ethiopia. And so in Kenya, after 2 days of picture taking, this is everybody, from school kids and park rangers to US ambassador to Kenya at the time, there he is in the middle, Bob Godek, to tourists with telephoto cameras, took 40,000 plus pictures. It's a lot of pictures. And, and then we've, after analysis, showed that the population of zebras was 2352 plus minus 72. It provided the tightest confidence bound of any count or sample or estimate of the population size to date. So good that the Kenya Wildlife Service, which is the official government organization, went from this is not how we count zebras to wait, this is exactly how we're going to count zebras, and now you're on the hook every 2 years. All right, so in January 2018, the event was repeated, and more people, more location, in fact, more species. They also added reticulated giraffe to this, and more images. 70,000 plus. But the cool thing is also more zebras. So we went from 2352 plus minus 72 to 2800 plus minus 150. So that's incredible. And then event was repeated also in 2020. I'll come back to that. So we made sure that everybody could participate, that it is not about us coming in, collecting data, doing some analysis, and throwing it back. We got donations and also funded by NSF of about 200 GPS-enabled cameras. We created a protocol which enabled everybody who does, whether they have GPS or not, to synchronize their cameras to GPS-enabled ones, so we would have location of where they took the picture, even if they didn't have GPS. We worked with nonprofits in Kenya, several nonprofits, that created this whole booklet of explaining what is the event about, what is the process, why are they taking pictures, what's going to be done with these images, what's the biology of this species, and the conservation story, and even created competitions. We did training, a lot of training, sort of throughout the entire set of counties that have gravy zebras, of explaining this with this booklet in English, then in some places translated in Swahili, and then translated into Maasai, northern Maasai, Samburu. Everybody from Kenya Wildlife Service officials, there they are with AR-15s lying under their feet, and that tells you just how dangerous the job of protecting animals is, quite often. To tour guides and then also tourists who coming in to participate in the event, and in fact tourists who flew in to participate in this event. So lots and lots of training kind of explaining why. So everybody would participate in a very informed way. There were also kids participating, and there was a whole nonprofit, Wildlife Direct, who did this games and turned it into a whole big game and competition. We also trained the conservation organization workers, particularly those who were dealing with the data, to use the platform so they would be able to analyze the data themselves, so we wouldn't be the ones doing it, right? The whole give me your data, here's the answer part. And so with all of that, we also did a lot of analysis to make sure that the data that we're getting were not biased, the results were not biased, that we could stand under the bridge that we built and stand really behind the answers that we're providing. So there is a lot of statistics, a lot of analysis that went into it. And so the answer was that from 2016 to 2018, population indeed grew because of, and we could say it very, very confidently, because of these confidence bounds, because they're disjoint. Not only it's true for the entire country, but also throughout every county that has gravy zebras, right? The population grew, despite 2 years of drought then. And we could look, and this is the governors and the conservancy operators, they're also, and biologists, they're telling us, okay, well, what about the juveniles? So looking at the 2016 at the time, because the event is at the beginning of the year, we could look at the 2016 data. What's the percent of non-adults in the population? So you need 30% of non-adults at least to have a stable population. So all the counties, except for one, have had about or more than 30% of non-adults in the population. So what's wrong with Meru? Like, any ideas why they don't have enough baby zebras surviving to adulthood? Yes?
Too urbanized?
Too urbanized is one suggestion, that it's too urbanized. Any other ideas, suggestion? Just so you don't feel any pressure, when I asked the same question of a room full of conservation biologists, they didn't come up with the right answer right away. So other ideas of why? High predator density. You went straight for the right answer. Well, so high predator density, it's yes. So normally we hear things like poaching, other things like the human. This is the one case where the humans are not at fault. In fact, In fact, the only thing that humans did as a good thing, the Meru County has done such a great job with lion conservation that there are too many lions per zebra. So every time these, lazy lions, numerous lions are seeing, not only zebra, but impala as well, but, baby zebra passing by, they're like, oh, look, barcoded snack, I'll take that one. So, but because the numbers were so tight, because the numbers were so confident, right? The data were so good, and because everybody trusted that data. This was not the data that we took, processed, returned. This was the data that they collected. They were part of the analysis. They processed, right? They understood why and trusted the data, trusted the process. In fact, the tagline for the event was, and still is, Kenyans powering conservation, right? Everybody participated. And because of that trust, they were able to put in place what otherwise would have been a very controversial policy of lion contraception, right? So Planned Parenthood, right? And to really put the balance of the predator and prey back, right? And it worked. In fact, we do have numbers that it worked. Based on those events, the Kenya Wildlife Service, together with all the governors of the counties that have gravy zebras, signed on to the proclamation of the putting together endangered species management plan based on the event and the future events. Putting in place, again, resources, people, land, and policy, and money. And the assistant director to Kenya Wildlife Service, Simon Gitau, said a sentence, made a statement that nearly made me cry, because that sentence, that this shows the power of citizen science and machine learning for conservation, contains 3 firsts when he said this. This was the first time that Kenya Wildlife Service used a counting protocol which was completely different from what they did before. Because until that point, they were doing flyby or drive-by with sampling and population size estimate. This was the first time that they let anybody other than their officials to be part of the process at all, right? So the citizen science part of it. And this was the first time that the words machine learning were used in a sentence by any Kenya Wildlife Service official. So that's a win. Based on those data, the IUCN entry for gravy zebra was also changed, and the population size was changed. And this is a good story, because before that, it wasn't clear that the population was stable or growing. And because of the repeated show of growth, despite the drought, the assessment is that the population is stable. And they're going to hopefully reassess it and see maybe it's growing now. So that's a success story. This is a change in a good direction. Great. So, fantastic, right? But what's good for science and conservation, unfortunately, can also be used for nefarious purposes by wildlife criminals. Geotagged images of data, of animals, of endangered species, can serve as beacons for poachers. As, here's an elephant, and a picture of an elephant posted on social media with location did, in fact, attract poachers within hours to the location. Because they're also getting more sophisticated with technology. And so, yes, social media platforms scrape a lot of this, the location and time information and put delays on posts like this, but it's still imperfect. And we do need to develop the technology to protect from the technology. Wildbook, as an aggregator, right, a large collection of large geotagged images of endangered species, we have to take this problem very, very seriously. So all our data is protected, And in fact, as protected as your banking data, although it's questionable whether that's good enough, right? We put in place a lot of, not only that cybersecurity, but we also put in place a lot of identity management of like logins and context-aware logins, who has access to what data, tracking provenance. We don't own any of the data. The data we retain the ownership with the organizations and people who upload it, but we protect that data. We manage that data, and we take it very, very seriously. We published a white paper called Privacy for Tigers, outlining the challenges and potential solutions to this. The other part is bias. If we're using all these different sources of data from all of these, especially from social media platforms, then there are many, many sources of bias that come in. So we have the true population. The first source of bias is nothing new to AI or to social media or anything. It's being in the right place at the right time to see the animals in the first place, right? And in fact, for some species, to be able to see them at all. The other part is the photo capture bias, and that doesn't matter whether it's an airplane flying over the forest elephants and who are hidden under the trees in the dense forest, or the camera trap that takes pictures but cannot see the butterflies because they're too small, or actually most of the birds, or a tourist going on a safari and deciding to take a picture of a zebra, or not, because they only care about birds. Because birders take lots of pictures of birds and pretty much nothing else. And if we're talking about social media, there is the bias of deciding to actually post it on social media. And which social media? I have a student who's done analysis of different platforms and different species. I mean, it's also very Western biased, and as you saw on iNaturalist, very kind of biased towards some places in the world of who will use the platform and what will they post on it. And then for each platform, there is the different ways of collecting data, and some of them allow you access to all data, some only 7 days of data, and so on and so forth. And then there is which model we're going to use to estimate the population size from all of this. And what we really, really care is just that error, not to figure out the bias in every single step. So I have several projects that we've done, and we're continuing to work on this. It's a very challenging problem, but it's solvable in some instances. And so with all of this, I hope over the last 45 minutes, I really showed you how, by design, AI and humans can enable science, conservation, and public policy by bringing communities, data, people, geographic regions, species together and working in partnership to provide solutions that people trust. And that trust, building a good algorithm, is only a small part of it. The big part of it is building that trust. And I want to thank a lot of people who continuously make this possible. The co-founders of Wildbook and Wildbook Project, the entire team of WildMe, including all the engineers who contributed to designing it, all the organizations that supported us, and most importantly, thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers and conservation and research organizations and people who collect the data, contribute the data, annotate the data, test the first algorithms, use the algorithms, and most importantly, deploy the policies, the interventions, and do the real work in the field to protect the biodiversity of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. All right. Well, we have time for a few questions. I think the way we should run this is if I can get to you, I will get to you with a microphone, and if not, I see a question here.
If you can yell loud enough, I'll repeat your question.
I would think funding would be a major issue.
Yes, funding. So the question is funding a major issue? Yes, it is a major, major issue. Biodiversity and conservation is hugely underfunded. And most of the organizations, most of the projects, there is a tiny group of us who does AI for conservation and biodiversity. It's like all in all, maybe 30, if we're being generous, different places and locations. Most of us do it out of the goodness of our heart and do a lot of work to raise some funding. It is hugely underfunded. And one of the, we pointed out, I've recently been part of the group that authored the AI and Biodiversity Report from the Global Partnership on AI. And one of our messages is that this is an area that needs some investment because we're losing biodiversity clearly faster than we can figure out what to do about it.
Oops, sorry. Well, thank you, Dr. Berger-Wolf, for a really stimulating talk on a monumental project, really. There's no doubt about it. I was glad you addressed some of the concerns about privacy and things like tracking animals and publishing data on them towards the end, because I thought if we did this with humans, we would be afraid of tracking and publishing data on them. I'm also wondering if there's some other harms you have to guard against. Like, for example, are you encouraging people to do whale watches and do luxury safaris, which ultimately could harm these animals? And also, is there a bias towards the animals that'll get recorded? So more charismatic animals are the ones that are going to be recorded in your database and therefore the ones that are going to be saved by this project?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a great question and something that we constantly struggle. And actually, the first part of it is by encouraging people to go to safaris and whale watching, are we doing more harm than good? That is a question that a lot of conservation organizations have struggled and sort of balancing, putting aside completely inaccessible to human areas versus encouraging people to engage with the animals, with conservation, with nature in many different ways. And to kind of how complex that is, one of the many unintended consequences of COVID, for example, is because primates can get COVID infection from humans, a lot of the the primate-like gorillas and chimpanzee preserves completely banned human visitors in the last 3 years. And that brought the funding down. So on the one hand, they're protecting the animals. On the other hand, they're struggling to retain the guards, the rangers, to provide their salaries. Some of them, I mean, again, there is no funding. There is not enough funding. And so there have been a couple of incidents where and this goes also for different reasons, so the tourism dropped, right, for rhinos and others. And so because of the funding drop, there are not enough rangers, poachers don't know about this, and so there have been incidents. But particularly with primates, it's been a huge issue. So it is still, and I'm not the one to decide that, but it's a very much a conversation that's ongoing. The other aspect of it, about unintended consequences of bias. So this is something that we're actively studying and can sort of watch this space. We're about to submit the paper for publication for different, but yeah, I mean, there's to kind of even more specific, the bias. We had a study where a research assistant went on a safari tour, many safari tours, and at every stop, she would record the number of every species that were seen from the stop. And then we collected SD cards of all the tourists who were in the same car for 2 hours. And they're amazing range. It's not only charismatic animals. It's you had birders in that car, and you had first-time safari goers, and those who've been on 5 of them. And so some of them in the 2 hours took 500 pictures. The other ones, and you can just do the math, how frequently they had to take a picture if in 2 hours they took 500 pictures, right? And others throughout the entire 2 hours they took 4. Some of them, you can see only birds. Others, it's every zebra in the first hour, and then in the second hour, okay, I've seen enough zebras. And so there are lots and lots and lots of biases, which is why and charismatic animals is another one. So what we're doing is not estimating in this pipeline every potential kind of exactly every potential. Oh, sorry. Source for bias, but overall, can we design approaches that overall minimize the error without explicitly estimating every one of them? And it turns out, yes, you can do this. We're using AI approaches for this, but in terms of what are other harms, so we constantly struggle with it, that there is a tendency, particularly among engineers, that if you can, every paper has to prove accuracy of your algorithm, even if the improvement is from, 86.5 to 86.7. But the resources that go into this, right, is it worthwhile? Also, is it deployable in the field, right? And ultimately, we have this as a pipeline of about 9 different algorithms strung together. Does the improvement in any one of them ultimately give you anything that would lead to policy change, for example, or to the conservation outcomes? That's our constant evaluator. And the trade-off, we don't even pose the problem in terms of the accuracy of any given algorithm, but in terms of the trade-off of human effort versus outcomes, versus conservation and biological outcomes.
I have 2 fairly quick questions. The second that you can go into at the end would be, how does one participate in some of this? Mm-hmm. And the first is, of your 1 million species, a huge number of them are going to be insects, plants, fungi, and I don't see that being addressed.
Right. You're absolutely right that we're focusing completely on animals in this. There are other projects. So there are several projects. Most of them still are focused on animals. But there are a couple of projects that take remote sensing data and correlate it with plants and do forest conservation, plant conservation, so really developing computer vision and AI approaches. There are a couple of ones that are focusing on sound and do that and use both sound and vision for insect conservation. There's almost nothing that is, in general, without technology, on conservation side of things, that's done for fungi. You're absolutely right there. So, and that has been, and in fact, biologically, we know much less about fungi than about plants and animals. And so, overall, so iNaturalist, for example, is right now probably the best source of data for animals, plants, and fungi. But there's not a lot of other efforts that are out there for, there is a bias towards animals for sure. The ones for plants are mostly at a kind of much lower resolution because they're broader. So they focus, the types of approaches also focus on monitoring, not only on species and biodiversity data collection, but on monitoring for illegal logging, for example. Sort of translating the agricultural activity and the impact of agricultural activity on forests and native biodiversity. So there's some work that's done there. Oh, how does one participate? So that depends on your skill set. There's every aspect of it is participatable. So, if you have pictures, take pictures, have an opportunity, contribute your data. That's the easiest one. Then advocacy, of course, you can directly contribute, donate to any one of these projects, by the way. So there's, iNaturalist also takes donation, but WildMe, we happily take donations. And then there is also eBird of the same range of projects. There is also policy advocacy if you're in a position of not yourself, but to convince somebody else to increase funding and focus and attention and raise the status of biodiversity conservation and the awareness that technology can actually help address that. Please use it. And then if you have the technical skills, every one of us, of the organizations in this space, relies on volunteer engineers as well as paid ones to really develop the work. And so all of the projects and organizations in this space will happily work with you to leverage whatever your technical skills are.
So in terms of sharing images,
Mm-hmm. You can go. You can directly upload them to any. So if you go to wildme.org, there is a set of platforms. By the end of the year, we'll be able to just take your whole dump and sort through which species. Right now, you kind of go species group by species group. Yes.
So are we able to just strap a camera to a car, like one of the safari cars, and have it record a video?
Yeah, so things like GoPros, yeah, people can also upload videos
So
from
what
those.
I'm saying is, are we able to still identify individuals when it's a video?
Yes, yes, and actually, one of my PhD students here, Jenna Klein, has done that is in the process of doing it from drones. Yes. Of identifying individual zebras and giraffes from drone videos. But yes, GoPros are absolutely doable.
I'm a PhD student in engineering, and I have so much concerns in global issues like this, but my specialty is not necessarily relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so inspiring to see that you are applying your field into this. So wonder if you have some general comments for people like me who want to contribute, but it's not their specialty necessarily.
So the range of potential technical contributions is huge. We worked with engineers who developed a camera that can be easily clamped onto an airplane talking about, or a car, to deliver a good quality video. There are people who worked on stabilization. There are people who, this is among different engineers, there are people who develop the particular type of UAV so that is quiet enough, that doesn't spook the animals, and can still take good enough videos, for example. There are design engineers who design good apps and interfaces so people can actually use them, right? So there's an artist, we worked with artists who do storytelling to engage people in the process. So there's a variety of skill sets, mechanical engineering, electric engineering, aerospace engineering. There's lots and lots and lots of different technical engineering expertise that not only our organization, but there are conservation drones that design drones for conservation. There's networking engineers that provide very clever solutions for delivering local network and being able to collect information in completely uninstrumented environments where there is no Wi-Fi or cellular, right? So there's all kinds of aspects of it that today people are trying to bring technology in a non-invasive way that doesn't destroy the environment we're trying to protect. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming today. Please join us upstairs in the Traditions Room for a reception, and join me in thanking Dr. Berger-Wolf for her presentation.
Thank you.